On quiet streets where nothing much ever changes, little things begin to matter more, like the way wind moves through the maple trees in late September, or how the porch steps creak beneath forgotten footsteps, or, in one small blue house at the end of Alder Lane, the way a white cat sits motionless at the second window from the left. She is always there, daylight or dusk, rain or frost. The white cat waits, her body still as stone, her breath hidden somewhere behind the lace glass. One grey ear tilted slightly, like she's listening for something only she can hear. Some say she's waiting for someone, for something, for a thing no one else remembers. She sits in that same spot every morning, every evening, every season. Old neighbors have grown used to her, walking their dogs or pushing strollers past that quiet window. Newcomers slow their steps, gaze upward, maybe shiver, because she doesn't move. She's been sitting there for years, they whisper. Doesn't blink, just stares. Is she real? People gave her names. Some called her Ghost, others Window Cat. One child down the street before moving away used to wave every morning as he passed, saying, "Good morning, Snow Queen." He never got a response, of course, but then again, maybe he did. The house itself seems to lean into memory, like it knows it's being watched. Blue paint chipped down to grey, shingles bowed, roses out front gone wild with time. And yet, always, the curtain at that one window stays exactly in place, perfectly parted, like someone meant for her to see. There's no sign of a human inside, not anymore. The mailbox overflows sometimes, until someone from the neighborhood clears it. A landscaper comes occasionally to hack back the hedges, but no one lives there now. Not really, only the cat, only the window, only the watching. They say it's not a ghost story, not the kind with rattling chains or fog at midnight. It's softer than that, simpler, but perhaps stranger, because what do we call it when an animal should have forgotten, who should have moved on, remains in one place? What does it mean, really, to wait? Does she still believe someone is coming home? Is it memory that keeps her there, or love, or something beyond both? We can only guess, because she's never left, not once, not in 6 long years. And that's where our story begins, with a window, a white cat, and the quiet kind of waiting that refuses to fade. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when that window didn't look so solemn, when sunlight filled the room behind it and laughter echoed off the hallway walls, when a record player sang morning jazz and the garden bloomed in neat little rows. And there was someone who lived there then, a woman with kind eyes, a wool cardigan, and a porch swing that swayed in time with her breath. And one winter evening, a kitten, let's go back, before the silence, before the waiting, before Sadie became the cat who never moved. It was not the sort of winter that made headlines. No blizzards, no bitter storms. Just a stretch of evenings when the clouds seemed content to linger, and the ground remained stubbornly cold. On one such evening, Edith shuffled across her porch, in worn slippers and a thick scarf, empty kettle in hand and a sigh in her lungs. She had forgotten to refill the bird bath earlier, and now the water inside had turned to glass. Poor birds, she thought, always looking for something that wasn't there. She leaned against the porch railing, feeling the cold press through her sleeves, and that's when she heard it. A sound so soft and thin she nearly mistook it for wind. But there it was, again, small, fragile, mewling, eager, lost, and almost embarrassed to be heard. Edith stepped carefully off the porch. Her knees hurt more now, especially in the cold, but curiosity overruled caution. She bent beside the steps and peered beneath the wood, where dry leaves had piled up like forgotten pages. Something stirred in the shadows. Two eyes blinked slowly, green and round. A patch of white fur, tangled with dirt and straw, shifted. Slightly. "Oh, sweetheart," Edith whispered. She crouched lower, knuckles pressed to cold soil, and cooed the way she had long ago when her daughter was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Slowly, the kitten crept forward. Thin legs, a rib cage you could count. One ear completely grey, like the edge of a soot-stained cloud. Without thinking, Edith opened her arms. The kitten didn't resist. Edith cradled her close, the way one holds. Something not just fragile, but half gone already. Her scarf wound around both of them now, a shared warmth. She didn't ask where the kitten had come from, or how long she'd been hiding beneath the porch. "Let's get you warm," she said softly, and they went inside. The kettle never made it to the sink. In the kitchen, Edith made a nest of old towels near the radiator. The kitten trembled as she nestled down, curling into a tight white ball. Edith poured a saucer of milk, too much, probably, but the little thing drank like it was remembering how. Later that night, Edith sat in her old armchair, the one with the sunken cushion and needlepoint cats stitched into the backrest. The kitten lay asleep on her chest, a soft weight rising and falling with each breath. "You need a name," Edith murmured. "Can't just call you Kitten forever." She glanced over at the bookshelf, at a dusty row of novels she hadn't touched in years. Her eyes landed on one in particular, Sadie, a novel her late husband had once read aloud to her, when they were still young enough to fall asleep in armchairs together. "Sadie," she said aloud. The kitten stirred. "Yes, that fits." Sadie stayed. By the week's end, she'd claimed the foot of Edith's bed. By week 2, the armrest of the sofa, and by week 3, she had discovered the window. Not just any window, the second one from the left in the front of the house. Framed in lace, ample light, and the perfect view of Older Lane. Sadie would leap up first, clumsily. Later, with feline grace and position herself, dead center, watching. Still, regal as anything royal. Neighbors walking by began to recognize her. They'd wave, speak gently, even leave treats beneath the porch. Edith laughed the first time she overheard a little girl whisper, "That's the Queen's window." Sadie didn't blink. Their days found a rhythm. Mornings began with the whistle of the kettle and the scratching of paws on tile. Edith, still wrapped in her pink robe, would place toast into the antique toaster, and Sadie would sit alert on the windowsill, waiting until jazz singer Ella Fitzgerald began to hum from the old radio. It was their song, somehow, just enough brass, just enough melancholy. After breakfast, Edith would knit or tend the garden. The flower beds looked better that year. Maybe it was the company, or maybe sadness watered things more evenly than people thought. Sadie followed without fuss, tail held like a flag, as if she'd been trained to do so in another life. Some afternoons, they sat quietly together, with a novel in hand, while Sadie dozed in a patch of warm carpet. And as the sun dipped westward, the white cat always returned to her station. The second window from the left, watching it, became a little ritual. One Edith never interrupted. Some evenings, she'd make 2 cups of herbal tea, habit, perhaps sand. Drink hers slowly while the other sat cooling on the tiled counter. Once in a while, she'd look up and say, "She'll be back before supper, you'll see." Sadie's ear would twitch, just barely. Sometimes, days felt longer than others. Grief has a way of stretching, but always the window, always the white. Cat. Edith began writing letters again, not email, not texts, but actual letters. The kind with stamps and smudged ink. She wrote to her daughter, who lived just past the mountains. Not every day, not even every week, but enough that her thoughts didn't stack up inside. She wrote about the garden, the maple trees, the way. The wind sounded different now that there was someone else breathing beside her. She wrote about Sadie, such a peculiar little creature, one letter read. Not demanding like most cats I've known, just present, steady, almost like she's watching time go by on my behalf. Another letter concluded, I sometimes wonder if she's waiting for someone, but I also wonder, maybe she just doesn't want me to wait alone. The reply came weeks later and was shorter. I hope one day I get to meet her. Sadie never broke her routine. Even in summer storms, thunder cracking like old joints in the sky, she would appear in that same window, unmoving, impervious, watching. Raindrops race each other down the glass. She'd wait until the last car passed, until the porch light flickered out, until the house quieted again. Into its usual hush, Edith often dreamed more vividly during those storms. Dreams of her husband walking slow through moonlit gardens, or of her daughter laughing barefoot under hanging laundry, or dreams where Ella Fitzgerald sang lullabies, and the window behind her never had glass at all, just light and sky and everything warm waiting on the other side. And each time Edith opened her eyes in the dim morning glow, Sadie was there, waiting, as if she had been all night. A sentinel. In fur, or perhaps something simpler, a friend. They were good years, quiet years, the kind people sometimes forget to count, but Edith would remember them. Not because of grand adventures or earth-shaking change, but because of the way one small life slipped into her own, with such ease it felt planned, and always, in every memory, in every letter, in every dream, there was that window and the cat. Sadie. Belonging to no one and everyone. Part pet, part moment, part miracle. But even good years keep moving, and even cats must someday learn what it means to stay. The seasons would change again. The maple leaves would fade to gold, and Sadie would still be there, watching from her post, because that's what the heart does when it's found something worth staying for. In the years that followed, life took on a kind of quiet music, steady like the ticking of Edith's mantel clock, soft like the pages of a well-worn novel. Each day spilled gently into the next, wrapped in a calm that only comes after enough. Time has passed for healing to become habit. Edith would rise slowly each morning, joints stiff but heart light. The kettle would whistle just before the sunlight pushed through the curtains. Sometimes she'd wake before the chime of the clock, only to find Sadie already perched at her post, the second window from the left, like a soldier who never left her post, even in sleep. Sadie had grown since that first winter. Her coat shimmered, white as snowfall now, groomed smooth and proud. The grey ear remained like a small signature hair, mark of melancholy or mystery, depending on the day. She didn't meow much, not unless she was hungry or dreaming, but she was always there. Present outside, the world moved. Bicycles wobbled by in spring. Dogs tugged leashes across the sidewalks in the summer. Leaves spiraled from trees in autumn, and boots crunched frost in winter. But inside that little blue house, things stayed wonderfully simple. People began to wave at Sadie. The mailman gave a little two-finger salute as he passed. Children squinted upward, wondering if she was real, while their parents murmured that cat's always there. There was one boy in particular, Jamie, who walked past each morning on his way to school, lunchbox thumping against his leg. At first he just glanced, then he began to smile, then wave. Sadie rarely reacted, but now and then her gaze would flicker. Edith noticed. "You've made yourself famous," she'd say with a chuckle, folding laundry beside the window. "You could run for mayor." Sadie blinked. The window had become more than a favorite spot. It was her portal, her watchtower, her tiny theater screen. And for Edith, it became a symbol. She began noticing how the light shifted through it each season, how morning sun turned lace patterns into golden puddles on the floor, how rain dotted the pane like falling stars, how the snow settled just beneath the ledge, never quite building enough to block the view. There was something reassuring about Sadie's ritual. She watched the world change, and that helped Edith believe she could stay still. After breakfast, Edith would write letters to her daughter, mostly. "It's as though the silence has softened," she once penned. "I don't feel alone anymore." Not really. She wrote about the garden, still blooming stubbornly in its narrow plots, about the neighbor kids who giggled outside while Sadie silently supervised them, about memories that tiptoed in just before bedtime, memories of a husband now gone and a child now grown, whom she still pictured in pigtails and muddy socks. And always, she wrote about Sadie. "She watches everything," said one letter, "but not like a cat. Not just curious. It's something deeper, like she's reading the world." It wasn't just nostalgia. Edith had routines with Sadie that carried her through each hour. Watering begonias with her shadow beside her, folding sweaters with fur pressed against her, slippers stringing words together with a rhythmic purr in the background. On Sundays, they listened to old records, first classical, later jazz. Edith's favorite was always Ella, followed by strings that lifted and dipped like a boat through memory. Sadie, dozing with one eye open, always seemed to twitch her tail slightly when the brass began dot in the afternoons. Neighbors sometimes dropped by with jars of jam or books they thought Edith might like. She never hosted long visits, they left quickly, sensing she enjoyed her quiet, but there was warmth in the exchange, and Sadie always remained on her throne above it all. The propped open window framing her like a still dash life. In subtle ways, the house had molded itself around them. Slight indentations on the cushions where Sadie liked to sit. A low slipper pan near the radiator that she refused to share. A tiny picture frame on Edith's desk that held a sketch her daughter had made. Just a cat in a window with Edith. Handwriting below, Queen of Alder Lane. On rainy days, Edith read aloud, everything from poetry to recipes. Sadie would stretch across the rug, paws extended like commas, her eyes lazily tracking the rhythm of Edith's voice. Sometimes, she'd stop mid-sentence and smile. "You understand, don't you?" she'd ask, and of course, there was no reply. But that never mattered. Evening brought its own kind of peace. Curtains drawn, tea poured, the gas heater humming low, like an old friend telling a story too familiar to finish. Sadie in the window, always, even after darkness, made it nothing more than a mirror. Edith often sat and watched her watching. "What do you see out there?" she mused one night. The sky clear and full of cold stars. "What's held your attention all these years?" Sadie didn't answer. She didn't even move, but her tail curled once. A silent punctuation. Another letter rested on the writing desk nearby. Half written, "I think she's waiting." It read, "But I don't believe it's for someone in particular. It might be for something more abstract, like the idea of a person returning, or a feeling that left but promised to come back." Then life, as life does, softened around its edges. Months folded into each other without sharpness. The roses out front bloomed late. Someone painted the neighbor's door yellow. Jamie started carrying a backpack instead of a lunchbox. Sadie remained. Her white fur gleamed in afternoon light, her posture dignified as ever. And with each passing day, Edith leaned a little more heavily on the steadiness of it, or the rhythm of Sadie's quiet loyalty, and the knowledge that no matter how much changed outside their window, one thing would always remain anchored. Love, after all, isn't always loud or needy. Sometimes it's just staying. And Sadie had mastered that art completely. Spring came later that year. The daffodils on Edith's lawn didn't bloom until mid-April, as if they needed extra time to believe in the season. The wind, though warmer, still carried a bite. On one particular afternoon, Edith sat on the front step with Sadie curled beside her like a ribbon of snow, both of them quiet, watching. That's when the cough started. Not loud or alarming, not yet. Just a small thing caught in the back of Edith's throat. She pressed a handkerchief to her mouth and waved off her own concern like a bothersome gnat. "Change of air," she mumbled to Sadie, who blinked slowly, unconvinced. Days passed. The cough lingered. At first, it only showed up in the mornings, then again in the evening. Then it stayed all day, soft but constant, like a second heartbeat. Edith ignored it as long as she could, wrapped herself in cardigans, drank more tea, avoided mirrors. But silence, even paired with jazz and rose-scented creams, can't fool the body forever. Sadie knew before anyone else. She stopped returning to the window each morning. Instead, she trailed Edith from room to room, a white shadow full of worry. She nestled closer at night, slept closer to her ribs, and refused food unless Edith had taken a bite first. Sometimes, when Edith stepped into the hallway and braced herself quietly against the wall, Sadie would sit at her feet without blinking. The kettle whistled. Letters went unwritten. Days folded, noisellessly. One morning, Edith took down a large box from the top of her closet. She sat on the rug for nearly an hour, the lid beside her. The contents half-spilled: old photographs, a laced baby bonnet, a college notebook with coffee stains, and nestled at the bottom, a stack of envelopes already stamped. She began sorting. One by one, she packed things away. Not as if saying goodbye, exactly. More like arranging a shelf before guests arrive. She paused over a small pillow Sadie liked to sleep on, smoothed the fabric, and set it gently by the window. Later that afternoon, she called Jamie's parents. The next morning, Barney, Jamie's mother, came to visit. She sat on the porch with Edith while Sadie lay between them. The conversation was soft, mostly questions about feeding, litter preferences, and Sadie's favorite naps. Then came the handing over of small things: Sadie's brush, a tin of food, a ribboned collar she never wore. "I don't think she wants to stay," Edith said, gazing toward the second window. "She's stubborn." Bonnie nodded. "So is Jamie. Maybe they'll get along. Maybe." That night, Edith made Sadie's spot by the radiator extra warm. She served a small piece of salmon, even though the vet had said no more treats after Christmas. Sadie ate without hesitation. Beneath the table, her tail curled around Edith's slipper. The cough had grown worse. In the following days, Edith stopped answering phone calls. She returned to writing, but the letters were shorter, and her handwriting trembled like a leaf. In Wind, one ended simply, "These have been good years." Her movements slowed. She slept more often. Sometimes she'd nap through the hour Ella used to play on the radio. But Sadie remained vigilant, like the clock above the mantel, steady in its ticking. On a late October morning, Edith sat at her armchair, wrapped in a quilt of faded violets and sage green. Sadie lay on her lap, purring faintly. The room was golden with autumn light. The lace curtain at the window swayed just slightly from an open vent. The smell of dried lavender and the faint dust of books filled the air. Edith's breathing slowed. She rested a hand on Sadie's back. "You keep watch now," she whispered, "just for a little while." Sadie didn't move. Later that day, Jamie knocked on the door. He had been sent to bring over soup his mother had made. When the door didn't open, he peeked through the front window and saw her still in the armchair, wrapped in the quilt, eyes closed, face more peaceful than he'd ever seen, and Sadie, white and unmoving, perched once again at the second window. From the left, looking out over Alder Lane, after everything had been taken care of, the guests, the flowers, the loss folded into neighborhood whispers, Jamie and his parents tried to take Sadie home, but she wouldn't stay. Every time they fed her and closed the door, she'd find a way back, through the garden fence, under the gate, along the narrow path she already seemed to know by heart. She would return to the blue house, wrap herself in leaf shadow, and climb, always, to the same window, the one with lace that never moved. People began to notice, even those who hadn't known Edith well. They'd see the flash of white fur in the afternoon light and pause, hushed. Someone started leaving bowls of water on the porch. A child drew a chalk heart on the sidewalk with the word Sadie printed carefully beside it. Online groups shared her photo without knowing her name. They called her the waiting cat. The house had gone still. No one came to live in it. Once in a while, someone would arrive to mow the lawn or check the roof, but the disrepair deepened. Paint peeled back to its bones. Weeds curled through the porch steps. Roses roamed the fence like ivy. And through it all, Sadie remained. She did not sleep on Jamie's porch anymore. She did not chase bugs or curl in sunbeams that didn't shine. Through Edith's lace curtains, she waited, not frantic or wild, but patient, a kind of sacred steadiness. A ritual lived in fur. No one knew how long she'd stay, or why she returned, or what she expected to see, but she never scratched the door or cried. She never begged for anything. She just sat, still, watching, waiting, and in that strange, unwavering quiet, the question changed. Not who is she waiting for, but perhaps, what has she become? Because there are some silences that feel larger than sound, some eyes, feline or otherwise, that watch not for what's to come, but for what was bravely held in memory, and some windows that stay open, in one way or another, long after the room behind them closes. Jamie's parents tried again. They carried Sadie gently in a basket with a blanket that smelled like lavender detergent. Jamie placed her in the spare bedroom and left the door ajar. The room had a wide window, a new sofa, 2 feeding bowls, but Sadie didn't want lavender or new sofas. She slinked between chair legs, around table corners, past the back door. By morning, she was gone, found again 2 houses down, curled beneath Edith's shuttered porch. precisely where the lace curtains still hung undisturbed, eyes open, ears alert, waiting, as always, at the base of the steps like time itself never moved past October. They tried 3 more times. Each time, Sadie returned. Eventually, Jamie stopped trying. The gate was left open. Water bowls stocked. Food dishes brushed clean each evening. Jamie visited her, often sitting cross-legged a distance away, letting silence do the talking. But Sadie didn't come to his lap. She never stepped fully from beneath the old porch. She belonged to shadow and stillness, living by a rhythm no one else could hear. The world kept changing. Snow came in waves that winter. Blankets of white covered Alder Lane, hiding cracks in sidewalks and secrets in soil. Some days, you could barely see the old house, just a drift of bittersweet vines and slanted shingles. But there was always the hint of movement behind the glass. That pale silhouette in the second window from the left. She would reappear, like clockwork. Some mornings before dawn, others as the bus rumbled past with 3 children tapping at frosted windows. Sadie never reacted. She only watched, and that became its own kind of comfort. People began rerouting their walks to pass by. Some brought treats, others just paused, for no reason they could explain. It felt right, somehow, to check if she was still there, unchanged, holding open the thread that stitched Edith's memory to the rest of them. Sadie never begged for food. She never meowed at passers-by. She simply existed, a presence, not a plea. She waited, not like a dog at the door, frantic and hopeful, but like a monument, a keeper of quiet devotion. Online. Her picture traveled further than Alder Lane. Someone posted a snapshot on community forums. This cat's been waiting at the same window for years. No one knows why. It was shared 100 times, then 1,000. They called her guardian ghost, sweet sentinel, the white watcher. But Jamie still called her Sadie. Through high school and part-time jobs, Jamie never stopped checking in. Sometimes he sat on the crumbling porch steps, thermos in hand. He'd whisper updates about school projects, about his mother's new job, about a dog he almost adopted. Sadie listened, or didn't. It didn't seem to matter. She waited. The mailbox rusted shut one spring. Ivy climbed through the cracks in the sideboards. Lilacs bloomed unexpectedly through broken fence slats, thick with scent. And still, through it all, that small white figure clung quietly to her window perch, eyes open like someone reading the light. She had aged. That much was clear. Her movements were slower, her landings from the ledge less graceful. The white of her coat had dulled to ivory, and the fur around her eyes thinned like fog lifting from glass. But still she returned. She always returned. Jamie's father tried fixing the front steps once. The boards creaked like memories. When the hammer rang out, Sadie vanished into the bushes. She wouldn't step near the porch for 3 days, so they stopped fixing things. Left the house the way it was, gently crumbling, patiently fading like parchment ink or old songs. By her 5th year at the window, Sadie had become more idea than pet. A grounding point, something still, something left when other things moved too fast. Jamie once wrote about her for a school essay. She taught me about love, he wrote. Not the kind you read in books, the kind that waits without asking, that watches even as the world forgets. No one could explain how Sadie survived those cold nights, or why she never strayed too far. Some said there was secret warmth in that broken house, leftover heat from love, maybe, or familiarity stitched into the walls like insulation, or the ghost of Edith herself, leaving windows cracked just enough for memory to slip back through. Whatever the reason, Sadie stayed. Even when Jamie left for a summer camp job 2 counties over, she stayed. Even after the storm with 60-mile winds that scattered tiles from the roof like petals, she stayed. People offered to adopt her. Someone brought a rescue team with warm blankets and airtight carriers. She slipped past them as though they were made of smoke. Later, Jamie laughed. She only has one address, and it never changed. The mailbox still carried her name in pencil, though it had faded now to dusklight, barely clinging to paper, and each morning, like breath returning to a hillside, Sadie appeared, a whisper in fur. The last echo in a story almost no one remembered how to tell. Jamie was 17 when the idea first struck, a quiet thought that arrived. Not like lightning, but like a drawer finally easing open after years of being stuck. It happened in early June as pollen dusted the windowsills and Edith's roses bloomed in wild, unpruned spirals across the fence. He was on the porch stoop, sipping watered-down lemonade, staring at the blue house with its sagging frame and soft silence, and at the cat. As always, Sadie was in her place. The second window from the left, unmoving, watching Jamie set down his glass and stood slowly, the wood beneath his feet groaning in response. He crossed the short stretch of lawn that separated his yard from Edith, and stepped over the low gate, which now leaned at an angle, held steady only by memory and rust. Sadie didn't flinch. Her eyes followed him as he reached the door and gently turned the knob. It creaked open, sticky at first, then gave with a groan of surrender. Dust clouded upward. The air inside was dense, but not hostile, like walking into a room that had been holding its breath. Jamie coughed, waved a hand, and stepped carefully through the threshold. The layout was the same, furniture draped, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, photographs still framed on the walls, slightly askew. He didn't touch anything, not at first, but the next day he came back with gloves and a broom and a trash bag. For days, Jamie worked quietly, not to clean the house exactly, but to remember it. He moved things aside gently, spoke softly as he opened drawers, looked under furniture, and thumbed through time that had gone still. His mother helped once or twice, leaving baskets of clean linens or sandwiches on the porch. Jamie didn't say much. He was looking for something. He just didn't know what. Then, one late afternoon, he found the diaries. They were in a box beneath Edith's writing desk, carefully stacked, each one wrapped in a ribbon of old lace. When he opened the first, it smelled like mint tea and lavender soap. Her handwriting was small but certain. He read slowly, hungrily, like someone learning the outline of someone else's breathing. There were entries about weather, garden plans, memories of her daughter as a child, thoughts too quiet to say aloud, and in nearly every single one, a mention of Sadie. Sadie watched the mail drop this morning. I think she's memorized the postman's step. She didn't eat much today, perhaps mourning with me. Can cats carry that kind of sorrow? She stared out the window as if someone were arriving. Maybe she sees something I don't. He flipped through pages filled with ink and pause, and then his eyes caught on one dated 2 months before Edith passed. If I go, will she still wait for me? Or will she know I've asked her to guard this place? Until you're ready, Jamie. Jamie froze. The house was silent but felt fuller somehow, like the walls themselves had drawn closer. He turned the page. She's made this her castle, this little house. I think she believes she's protecting something more than just air and curtains. Maybe that's the truest kind of loyalty. Not guarding a person, but their memory. There were other entries, ones that mentioned Jamie directly. He waves to her every day now. He's kind, quiet in all the right places. If he ever finds these diaries, I hope he understands what it means to be watched over. Jamie carried the diary to the old armchair in the corner and sat down, hands resting lightly on the covers. Outside, Sadie had not moved. The late sun spilled across her fur in long golden lines, and something inside Jamie's chest opened wider than it had in a long time. That night, he didn't sleep much. The next morning, he made a decision. Over breakfast, between bites of toast, he looked up at his mother. "I want to fix up the house," he said quietly. She paused. "The old one, Edith's. I think I need to." Bonnie hesitated, then nodded. Jamie began again. Not just dusting this time, not just clearing space. New nails in old porch rails, fresh paint the color of sea glass. Windows washed until the sun sang through them again. Sometimes he worked for hours, sometimes only minutes, but each day he showed up, and so did Sadie. She watched him from the second window. She didn't come inside, didn't shift from her post, but her eyes tracked him, maybe with approval, maybe just with patience. Some neighbors offered help, others asked questions. Jamie never gave full answers. How could he explain that he was keeping a promise he hadn't known existed? One afternoon, as he trimmed back the wild tangle of roses, Jamie paused, dirt on his palms, sweat on his brow. He looked up at the window. Sadie's eyes met his. "She asked you to stay," he whispered. Sadie didn't blink. She meant it for both of us. The breeze picked up just then, catching one of the lace curtains and lifting it slightly. Sun glinted through. Dust danced, and slowly, gently, Shade turned her head not away from him, but back toward the window, as if settling into her place once more, not to wait, but to witness. Jamie smiled, a quiet one, soft around the edges. Then he turned back to the roses and continued to clear the path. The windows opened easier now. Jamie had taken the time to clean the tracks, oil the hinges. The light poured in without effort, cascading softly across old wood and new cushions. The house smelled like lemon soap and morning toast again, the kind of quiet that used to come from Edith's hands. Now came from Jamie's. Sadie still sat at the second window from the left, but it felt different. She didn't sit there with tension in her spine anymore, or with the rigid posture of a cat, waiting for something that never returned. She leaned gently now, sometimes stretched, sometimes even dozed in the sunbeam that crept across the sill. Jamie noticed. He didn't try to change her, he just let her be. During the day, they shared the space. Jamie studied in the living room, notebooks sprawled across the coffee table. His textbooks, science, history, literature rested in the same spots where Edith's poetry volumes once had. And Sadie, older now, would curl beside the window or under the table, paws tucked in, light reflecting off her graying coat. She moved slower, her jumps shorter, sometimes absent altogether, preferring to climb, still elegant, still quiet, but more tired than before. They spent afternoons in the garden, just like Edith used to do. Jamie wore heavy gloves to pull the roses back into their borders. He pruned gently, remembering the way Edith had once said, Rosy things need boundaries. 2. Sadie followed at her own pace. She'd pause near the lilies, blink at the bees, slip into shade whenever the sun lingered too long on her back. The neighbors smiled when they passed. Some waved. Some brought cuttings to place by the gate. A few even said thank you, though Jamie wasn't sure exactly what they meant. Maybe it wasn't to him. Maybe it was to Sadie. He began to read. Edith's diary allowed some evenings just a passage or two. Not every day, just enough. She wrote, "This for both of us," he said once, glancing at Sadie's ear twitch at the sound of her name. June stretched into July, then August. Sadie's fur thinned more around her face. Her eyes clouded slightly, but her gaze still steadied Jamie, especially on the hard days, especially when the silence inside the house sometimes reminded him it was built on absence. Sadie knew. She always seemed to know. One night, Jamie found her curled on the sofa, not in her usual spot beside the window. Her breaths came slowly, ribs rising in long, meaningful pauses. He sat beside her, cross-legged, and placed a blanket nearby without touching her. And they sat like that. In the morning, she was better. Tired, yes, but alert. She padded to the water bowl on her own, ate slowly, cleansed one paw as if reclaiming her grace, but Jamie knew the signs. She didn't climb as often, slept longer, blinked not with curiosity but gratitude. Late one evening in September, Jamie came home from the store with milk and 2 apples. He found her already in place. The second window from the left, she rested on the sill, one paw beneath her chest, tail curled in a perfect loop. The sun had nearly set, gold light brushing the side of her face, casting long shadows across the lace. She looked peaceful. He placed the apples on the counter and sat in Edith's chair now, slightly repulsed, but still the same in all the important ways. He didn't say anything. Sadie didn't move. He watched her for a long time, and in that quiet, he thought about all the mornings he had seen her waiting there. About the days she'd watched Edith, then watched the house, and eventually him. About all the years that passed between movements. The wind lifted the curtain slightly. The light dimmed. Jamie rose, walked slowly toward the window, and crouched beside her. "Hey," he said softly. Sadie didn't startle. She breathed once more, slow and certain. And then she stilled. Jamie reached forward and rested his hand near her paw without touching it. Not right away. Just being near was enough. Behind him, the house held its breath, and the street outside went on as always, bicycles leaning against fences, robins chirping from crossbeams, a purple sky folding gently into itself. The world did not stop, but something in it had settled, and at the window, Sadie remained a while longer in silence, bathed in the last warmth of daylight, watching, as always, with all the patience of love remembered. The window sat quiet again. No pawprint on the sill that morning, no grey ear glinting in the sun. Only lace curtains folded back slightly, as they always had been, as if still waiting for a shape that would never quite return. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. People noticed. They passed slower those first few mornings. Before, they would check to see if she was there, the way you glance at a clock you've always trusted. Now they didn't look for her, but remembered instead. A pause in their step, a shift in their breath. The stillness was sharper now, touched with farewell. The town didn't hold ceremonies for cats, not really, but hushes fell heavier across Alder Lane for a while. A child left a bouquet of daisies near the porch. Someone chalked a heart beneath the window, and Jamie placed one of Edith's old letters beside the garden gate, folded and tied with a piece of blue yarn. No addressed name, no need. Everyone already knew. Sadie had been more than a pet, more than a cat on a windowsill. She had been memory, wrapped in fur, a witness to time, a quiet presence that, somehow, made silence feel full instead of empty. Jamie sat alone in the house for a long while after. Not out of grief, exactly though, of course. There was grief, but out of reverence. Some spaces ask us not to rush past them. Some goodbyes ask only for us to stay still and steward the quiet. Autumn crept in gently that year, with softer light and leaves slow to fall. The roses bloomed late again, one last defiant show. Jamie cleaned Sadie's bowl, but didn't store it away. It sat at the edge of the kitchen, gleaming quietly in the morning sun. Sometimes he still read from Edith's diary. Only now he read aloud to no one, but the words didn't feel unheard. Perhaps memory lingers heavier than air dot. Then one afternoon, weeks later, it began again. A noise from the porch. Small, brief, a soft tapping, like curiosity hesitating. Jamie opened the door and stepped outside. There, barely more than a blur, sat a new kitten small, with fur the color of morning fog and eyes too large for her head. She looked up at him, and some note in the air felt familiar. He didn't ask where she came from. He simply knelt, extended his hand, and waited. She came forward cautiously, sniffed his fingers, then nuzzled his palm. Her purr was faint, but present. He brought her inside. She was different than Sadie, more restless, more prone to sudden sprints through the hall. But there was something about her, something like déjà vu, tucked beneath her small paws. She explored the kitchen, scrambled up the couch, tested a few windows, and then, without prompting, she found it. The second window from the left. She leaped onto the sill with wobbly grace, settled herself, and stared out. Jamie stood beside her, watching the same scene Edith once had. The old maple trees, now yellow and thinning. Children pedaling home from school, their laughter softening into the distance, and that light cold and gold crossing through the glass like a kind of memory reborn. He smiled. She liked it there. "Too," he said. The kitten blinked. He named her Delilah. It didn't mean anything at first, just sounded right. But it grew roots. She answered to it in ways cats rarely do, like she recognized something. Time went on. Delilah grew. Jamie grew. Holidays came and went. Seasons rotated their canvas. People moved in and out of Alder Lane. But the house remembered. And so did the window. Sometimes, Jamie swore he heard something on quiet afternoons when the breeze rustled the curtains just right. A purr he couldn't place. A silence that held echo. He didn't chase it. Didn't explain it. Some presences don't need proving. And so, the window remained. Sometimes empty. Sometimes claimed by a cat new to the post. But always open. In one way or another. And if, on some morning, a neighbor should pause, look up, and see a feline figure perched calmly at the glass perhaps, they'll smile, or wave, or whisper quietly, "She's still here," because maybe it was never about absence at all. Maybe it never had to be.